Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for, well, a high-speed collision between academic bureaucracy, suburban romance, and New York organized crime.
Yeah, it's a lot. We've taken a deep dive into the source material from Extracurricular Activities, and it chronicles the life of this English professor, Alison Bergeron.
And this is not your standard campus drama. I mean, not at all.
No.
Yeah.
Alison's life is just a masterclass in chaotic multitasking. She's juggling this intense pressure at St. Thomas College, a really complicated and fraught romantic history, and she somehow keeps finding herself squarely in the middle of multiple murder investigations.
So our mission today is to pull out these surprising nuggets of knowledge that are kind of hidden in all this chaos. Specifically, how she manages this extreme information overload, what her choices tell us about personal identity, and maybe most importantly, how the source material kind of reframes how we think about risk.
Right, because the most terrifying threats, as you'll see, are often the ones we completely overlook.
And that risk assessment, it doesn't start with a whisper of danger. It starts with a full-blown scream of consequence.
It really does. We start with the scene that just shatters Alison's carefully constructed coping mechanisms. She walks into her familiar kitchen in Dobbs Ferry, New York, after what sounds like an absolutely agonizing day.
And Alison has a very specific routine for unwinding. It requires high-proof Cattell 1 martinis,
Yes.
served with 3 blue cheese stuffed olives. Very specific, almost like ritualistic.
Totally. And that's followed by a light dinner of 2 Klondike bars.
It's the perfect snapshot of her life, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's highly structured, intensely personalized, and maybe a little self-destructive, but it's reliable.
Exactly. It's her thing. Except on this one night, that routine is just utterly obliterated. Sitting there at her kitchen table is her ex-husband, Ray Stark, and he is definitively deceased.
And not just dead. I mean, the way he died is professional, it's gruesome, and it's instantly unforgettable.
Yeah. He's sitting upright, with this tortured look forever etched on his handsome but lifeless face. But the most chilling detail,
His hands and feet.
they've been brutally hacked off, just bloody nubs at his wrists and ankles.
This discovery, it just immediately establishes the high stakes. This isn't some domestic tragedy.
No, this is a message. It's a signature. And for Alison, this is not her first brush with homicide. We enter her story already knowing she was centrally involved in the previous campus murder of Kathy Miceli.
Right. So that history instantly makes her this, reluctant nexus point for a whole cascade of renewed violence and criminal consequences. And it's all spilling directly from Ray's incredibly messy past.
It sets up the central conflict perfectly. How do you grade student papers and fulfill your administrative duties and, maintain any semblance of a normal life when organized crime is literally performing hits at your kitchen table?
It's the ultimate test of psychological endurance. So let's unpack the web of her life, starting with the source of her, let's call it legal stress, St. Thomas College.
What's so compelling about Alison's story is this radical juxtaposition she's living in. I mean, the highest stakes are literally life and death. But the lowest stakes involve this bureaucratic, just mind-numbing tedium. And that tedium is actively contributing to her stress levels.
Exactly. We have to talk about academia as a minefield. St. Thomas is clearly a college that's grappling with a severe identity crisis and probably some budget problems.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
The president, we assume, under pressure from students demanding some modernity, mandated a curriculum review committee for the English department. He's insisting they need more diverse course offerings.
And this unenviable, just soul-sucking task falls entirely to Alison.
Of course. Assigned by her department chair, Sister Mary McLaughlin. Her job is just to collect all the current syllabi from her senior colleagues to analyze the curriculum.
Now, that sounds simple, right? But the source material paints such a vivid picture of the resistance she faces.
It really does. These senior colleagues, they weren't just prickly. They were deeply entrenched, technophobic nuns who had been teaching American literature or poetry for decades.
And they were openly resentful of the curriculum change, the administration, and just the sheer audacity of being asked to document their work.
The detail here is just fantastic. Like you take Sister Callista, who taught American literature.
Oh, yeah.
Alison recounts the sheer agony of trying to get that syllabus. She notes that Sister Callista insisted on hard copy only and practically spat at her, then slammed the office door on her foot during the exchange.
So this isn't just administrative work for Alison. It's hand-to-hand combat over pedagogy and paper copies.
And the kicker, Alison notes this task was, predictably, unpaid.
Of course.
It's completely consistent with the history of St. Thomas, low pay, long hours, and the expectation that faculty will just absorb these massive administrative burdens without any compensation.
It's a perfect example of this dense institutional bureaucracy existing right alongside high-stakes personal chaos.
And that's a crucial analytical point here. The source material uses this academic pressure cooker to show Alison's chronic state of stress. She needs that high-proof vodka and the hyper-specific Klondike bar routine, not just to cope with the occasional murder,
Right.
but to deal with the grinding, daily humiliation and resistance from her colleagues. The psychological toll of dodging a resentful nun is, in some ways, just as debilitating as dodging a mob boss. It's just a different kind of injury.
So, if her professional life is about navigating this passive-aggressive Catholic academic resistance, her personal life, specifically with Ray Stark, was about navigating active, just reckless negligence.
Ray Stark is a classic study in the consequences of boundary issues. He's described as extremely handsome and charming, a guy who clearly coasted on his looks and charisma, but critically, the least self-aware person Alison had ever met.
And their marriage, which ended in divorce, had this origin story laced with tragic urgency. Alison's dying mother made her promise not to become an old maid.
Which led to this quick, really ill-advised union with the closest handsome man she could find.
And even after the divorce, Ray continued to exert this kind of soft control. He'd still show up unannounced, he still had a key, and Alison confessed she struggled to send the signal that she wanted to, and I quote, cut his testicles off every time she saw him.
This failure to enforce boundaries, both by Ray and, by Alison's kind of passive acceptance of his presence, that's what allowed all this chaos to spill over into her life.
And his history of infidelity was just staggering. 4 people, including their neighbor, Terry Morrison, and most consequentially, one of Alison's own students, Julianne Podowski.
Wow. And Ray, in the days right before his murder, was just spiraling with paranoia. He mentioned feeling unsettled, watched. He believed someone had been in his Capic Street apartment, even though nothing was stolen.
His list of potential enemies was a literal who's who of dangerous people. The mob boss, father of a former girlfriend, Peter Miceli, which connects back to the prior investigation, and the husband of another one of his lovers. Ray was actively aware that his lack of self-awareness and boundary issues had placed him in a really high-risk environment.
So his murder wasn't random at all. It was the inevitable final consequence of his reckless lack of boundaries.
Okay, so let's shift from the destructive X to the complicated, unavailable men who populate Alison's current romantic landscape, because it reveals this pattern of attraction to individuals who are, physically or emotionally out of reach.
The primary figure here is Detective Crawford, the 6-foot-plus sexy cop she fell for during the previous murder investigation.
Right. Alison notes she fell for him so hard her head spun, but their relationship was just permanently stalled by what she calls the Crawford dilemma.
Crawford was legally married to his wife, Christine, who, we learn, was a devout Catholic and a stickler for church law.
And she refused to grant him a divorce without an annulment, which Alison so succinctly and hilariously describes as a bureaucratic get-out-of-jail-free card for divorcing Catholics.
And that's a key piece of jargon we should probably elaborate on for you. An annulment in the Catholic Church is a declaration that the marriage was never valid in the first place, regardless of how long it lasted.
And that process is notoriously long and arduous. It requires this extensive church investigation.
So Alison knew this could take years, and she just refused to get into a permanent relationship with a technically married man, no matter how much she wanted him. He was emotionally available, but, legally and religiously untouchable.
Then you've got her second unavailable man, Father Kevin McManus.
Right. Kevin is Alison's friend, her confidant, and a celibate priest who is really into God.
So their relationship gives her this measure of emotional safety. They socialize a lot, often meeting for wings at Maloney's or dinner at the River Edge Steakhouse. But Kevin is, of course, absolutely off limits.
And the visual of Kevin is just perfect. He hates the uniform, and he often looks like a middle-aged surfer, wearing shorts, a life is good t-shirt, sandals.
And despite his celibacy, or maybe because of it, he becomes her source of unsolicited dating advice. He's always pushing her to move on from Crawford.
He's her safe harbor, but he's also this constant reminder of the complexity of her romantic life.
And finally, we have to mention Max, Alison's best friend and chaotic support system. Max is just a force of nature.
She really is. Max has an IQ of 160, she runs a cable TV station, and is affectionately labeled a nymphomaniac.
And the contrast there is so fascinating. It's high intellect applied to these, like, low-brow pursuits. She's a genius at mental math, specifically calculating show ratings on the fly.
Yeah, for things like the projected viewership for Housewives, the true untold story.
She provides Alison with this crucial, although often disruptive, support. Max, who's engaged to Fred Wyatt, who is Crawford's detective partner,
Right.
offers her a place to stay in her Tribeca apartment, though Alison notes that this often involves listening to Max conduct loud phone sex.
Of course. And Max also takes on the role of Alison's style advisor, forcing her out of her preferred black attire for the upcoming wedding and insisting she wears something fun and sexy.
That whole genius nymphomaniac best friend wedding planner dynamic is more than just comic relief, though.
I agree. It shows that Alison surrounds herself with people operating at high speed and high intensity. Max is focused on ratings and sex. Ray was focused on affairs and risk. Crawford is focused on crime and bureaucracy.
It suggests Alison's identity requires these high levels of stimulation to feel engaged, which might explain why she keeps attracting violence.
The discovery of Ray's body is really the catalyst that forces Alison out of this passive, kind of boundaryless life and into active survival mode. And the sheer brutality of that grisly discovery is what immediately separates this from a typical suburban crime.
The moment is just etched in detail. Ray sitting at her kitchen table, his wrists and feet reduced to bloody nubs, a professional violent act that explicitly ruined her plans for laundry and her beloved Cadle 1.
And this signature, the missing hands and feet, that's the first real nugget of insight the source material gives us. Why dismemberment?
Well, Alison and Max do their own little impromptu research later. Max suggests the obvious. Just Google missing hands and feet.
And they realize this was a known mob signature hit, specifically linked to the Miceli crime family.
This detail provides a layer of, like, dark humor and analytical insight. The alleged logic behind removing the hands was to prevent fingerprint identification, to hinder the police investigation.
Right. But Alison, thinking about modern forensics, immediately recognizes this as a somewhat archaic, almost pathetic attempt at misdirection.
Yeah, she notes that the Micelis must be morons, having never heard of facial recognition or dental records or DNA analysis.
It's a mob hit executed with outdated methodology. It forces you to constantly reassess the competence level of the criminals involved.
The police response was swift, given the quiet location. Dobbs Ferry is described as a town so sleepy that a Dunkachino theft is big doings.
Detective Joe Harden, a hound dog-faced fellow who looked perpetually sad, led the initial questioning.
And Alison, despite her shock, she knew she needed to contact Crawford immediately. But she also knew she couldn't openly talk to a married NYPD detective while being questioned by local law enforcement.
Which led to her classic coded call.
She left this calm and casual message on Crawford's voicemail, detailing Ray's death and dismemberment, but claiming, for the benefit of local police, that she was calling my priest.
It's a remarkable example of rapid-fire risk management under extreme duress. She's maintaining this veneer of piety while actually engaging with her secret romantic and criminal connection.
And Crawford, reading between the lines or maybe just recognizing the tone, arrives at the station almost immediately. He flashes his NYPD gold shield, instantly establishing hierarchy over the local police.
Right. He spoke privately with Detective Catherine Madden, who Alison pegged as someone who had spent years in the convent before becoming a cop. Crawford used his connections and his authority to gather critical intelligence, intervening on Alison's behalf and effectively bringing his power structure into the local investigation.
But this intervention came at a profound cost for Alison. She immediately reflected on the cost of her involvement.
Yeah, she was in the eye of the storm again, feeling like a complete pariah in her community, having been peripherally involved in two heinous crimes. She felt compelled to keep a low profile, fearing a public stoning.
And this is where you have to really dwell on the psychological pressure. Alison is a character who values structure and intellect. Being constantly associated with gruesome violence threatens her professional identity, her stability. The internal monologue is clear. She's desperate to move on from the chaos Ray created, but his death has just dragged her back in deeper than ever.
And the source material offers this flicker of dark humor here, too. She considers seeking therapy from the campus psychologist to cope, but immediately dismisses the idea because the counselor wears too much patchouli.
It suggests her standards for self-care are still rooted in her highly specific aesthetic preferences. Even trauma can't force her to abandon her distaste for certain parts of academic culture.
So the investigation immediately forces Alison to confront the Miceli family, which she thought she had left behind after the previous campus murder. The Miceli shadow is long and extremely complicated.
We meet Gianna Miceli, Kathy's mother, and the mob wife. Alison encounters her at St. Thomas, while Gianna is mournfully cleaning out Kathy's dorm room.
And Alison observes the genuine grief etched on Gianna's face, which adds this complex human layer to the whole organized crime narrative.
The source material also drops a crucial background detail about Gianna's history of extreme reactions. Max recalled an incident involving Gianna's ex-boyfriend, Sal Piccione, a bartender and gigolo.
Right. Gianna caught him kissing another bartender in an alley, suggesting a history of violent, emotionally driven responses to betrayal. And that becomes critical later on.
Then came the visit from Peter Miceli himself, the father and supposed mob boss. Peter shows up at Alison's house, strangely dressed in this bright salmon golf attire, professing to make amends. He tells her he owes her for solving Kathy's murder.
It's a highly unnerving encounter. Peter is simultaneously charming, dangerous, and a little bit flirtatious.
He directly asks about Crawford and expresses sadness over Ray's death. But despite Alison directly asking if he or his people killed Ray, Peter denied any involvement.
The exchange is just filled with veiled threats and power plays. Peter temporarily disconnected Alison's phone line during the conversation, chuckling that he used to work for AT&T.
Which is a clear, chilling hint at his familiarity with wiretaps and surveillance.
The tension then peaks when Peter confronts her again at the diner. He says he wants to pay his respects, but the interaction quickly devolves into this creepy display of misplaced affection. He kisses her on the neck, hinting that he liked her maybe too much.
And he also drops a bombshell. He strongly suspects that Ray was the father of Kathy's unborn baby, which would give him a powerful motive for the dismemberment.
Right. And this revelation forces Alison to divulge a deep, painful secret about Ray's hidden life.
She immediately shuts down the paternity theory by revealing that Ray had a vasectomy years ago without telling her while she was teaching in Ireland.
And she had spent years believing she was infertile. She marked this as a horrible betrayal.
And although Peter dismisses the story as ridiculous, the truth stands. Ray couldn't have been the father, forcing Peter to look elsewhere for a motive. Or maybe shifting the focus entirely.
So Alison, still reeling from finding Ray's body, realizes she needs answers. She revisits Ray's Capex Street apartment in Riverdale using a key he had foisted upon her years earlier.
And the apartment itself is a testament to Ray's arrested development. It's decorated in early dorm room-style IKEA furniture propped up by milk crates.
Yeah, Alison confirms her divorce buyout money clearly went straight to his car, not his decor.
While trying to reach a roll of toilet paper behind the tank, which is a brilliant mundane detail, she makes a crucial discovery the police missed. Hidden behind the toilet was a DVD, a blurry, unoriginal sex tape.
The identification of the woman in the tape was the next step in Ray's parade of infidelity. She was tall, about 6 feet, with the most toned thighs and a large heart tattoo on her lower back.
And Alison instantly dubbed her Miss Blurry Tattoo Ass.
The tape itself was terrible quality blurry, out of focus, and utterly lacking originality, a final, fittingly pathetic legacy for Ray's reputation.
And Alison immediately theorized that Miss Blurry Tattoo Ass might have killed Ray to retrieve the incriminating footage.
And in this wonderful collision of her academic and criminal lives, Alison quickly identifies a woman. She sees a student at the campus bookstore wearing a blue and gold St. Thomas sweatshirt, low-rider jeans, and bent over enough to reveal the huge red heart tattoo.
It was Julianne Podowski, one of Alison's own students and Ray's former lover.
Julianne later voluntarily spoke to the police, confirming she broke it off because Ray was clingy. Alison, however, offered the student some subtle, non-criminal advice. Focus on her studies, and recognized that Robert Frost did not write Chicken Little.
The juxtaposition of the sex tape and Robert Frost just perfectly summarizes Alison's life.
So while Alison is managing mob threats and student infidelities, she is still trying to move forward romantically. But her heart remains tied up with Crawford, who's perpetually stuck in that annulment waiting game.
Right. And Alison knows she can't wait for the 2 years it might take for the church bureaucracy to process the annulment. So Father Kevin, playing the role of the well-meaning celibate matchmaker, set her up with his brother, Jack McManus.
And Jack sounds like a genuine catch. He's tall, jet black hair with gorgeous blue eyes, works in PR for the New York Rangers.
He takes her to a game and secures center ice seats right behind the home bench. Alison, the inner French-Canadian hockey fan, is thrilled. She admits he's a veritable poor woman's George Clooney.
But that moment of escape is ruined by the intrusion of her criminal life. Crawford spots Alison on TV during the game.
And he later confronts her at the college, displaying clear jealousy and anger.
So Alison uses Jack's existence as a shield, leveraging his availability and attractiveness to avoid discussing Crawford's perpetually sluggish annulment timeline.
This dynamic is crucial. Alison seems subconsciously attracted to the boundary that protects her from true commitment, and Crawford is now forced to confront the potential loss of Alison because of his legal entanglement.
Just as Alison is wrestling with her romantic fate, the investigation takes a hard left turn, away from organized crime and straight into the terrifying reality of suburban domestic violence.
It focuses on her seemingly innocuous neighbors, Terry Ann and Jackson Morrison.
Terry Morrison shows up at Alison's house, deeply distraught, and she opens up about the sordid details of her 5-year marriage to Jackson.
And Jackson is characterized as a recovering drug addict and alcoholic with documented anger management issues.
So Terry's immediate suspicion falls on her own husband. She's convinced Jackson killed Ray because Ray had cheated with her, and Jackson was out late and in a bad mood the night Ray died.
And Alison, surprisingly, is skeptical. She notes the sheer banality of her neighbor's claim.
Yeah, she points out that she often comes home late and in a bad mood without murdering anyone. It shows Alison trying to apply logic to a situation that is just increasingly irrational.
Jackson, the suspect, is a graphic designer, a description that perfectly fits the archetype of the innocuous suburban guy. He appears affable but condescending, flexing his alleged intellect by claiming to speak French.
Right, très bien, parlez-vous français. And the Morrisons also share Alison's cleaning lady, Magda, who is a great source of local gossip.
Max, always the dynamic force, suggested Googling the hands and feet thing, linking it initially to the Miceli signature. But she also accompanied Alison to that Shakespeare performance of Merry Wives of Windsor at Boscobel.
And this is where the domestic drama becomes a public spectacle. They spot Terry and Jackson rolling around in the throes of passion on a blanket, seemingly enjoying this sudden, passionate reconciliation despite the murder suspicion hanging over them.
This bizarre display just deepens Max's suspicion that their marriage is not just volatile, but dangerously theatrical.
And Max, who has no boundaries, later trespassed into the Morrisons' house while Alison stalled outside, checking for any obvious murder weapons.
She didn't find any chainsaws, but she did get an eyeful of their intensely saccharine toadstool and parasol wedding portrait, a visual representation of their deceptively sweet suburban facade.
Shortly after this, the Morrisons disappeared, which confirms Alison's suspicion that something was gravely wrong.
They left behind their beloved golden retriever, Trixie, who Alison reluctantly adopted, noting Trixie was very special. The dog's presence provided Alison with some unexpected emotional support after all the trauma.
The disappearance spurred Alison into action again. A suspicious 911 call originated from the empty Morrison house. Alison, investigating, saw a small red car slowly exit their detached garage in reverse.
Driven by, detective fervor and, frankly, stress-induced recklessness, Alison began chasing the car.
This led to one of the most absurd and high-velocity moments in the book.
Alison was pulled over by the New York State Troopers, the Staties, as they're known, after the other driver called them to report being followed by a lunatic.
She was arrested in her pajamas for a whole litany of charges: speeding, reckless driving, harassment, and resisting arrest, all near Stu Leonard's, the massive local grocery store.
The location of the arrest, near a suburban shopping landmark, is just fantastic. It grounds the chaos in banality.
This incident required immediate high-level extraction. So Crawford called his brother, Jimmy Crawford, the lawyer.
And Jimmy is described as short, pudgy, and street tough, specializing in criminal defense. He successfully bailed Alison out, getting most of the serious charges dropped.
All she was left with was speeding and a requirement to take a defensive driving course. Alison notes that owing Jimmy was the last thing Crawford needed, given Jimmy's own penchant for driving his BMW too fast.
So the tension momentarily eased, but that calm was the prelude to the second, more horrifying discovery.
Alison hired Brendan, the neighbor's tall, energetic son, who Alison often called Bagpipe Kid, to walk Trixie.
And while digging furiously by the shed in the backyard, Trixie discovered a shallow grave. The victim, Terry Morrison. And Terry, like Ray, was also missing her hands and feet.
The realization was immediate and terrifying. This was now a confirmed serial murder scenario, and the killer lived next door.
The shared signature, the missing appendages, linked Ray and Terry not to a distant mob conspiracy, but to a close, personal, suburban rage.
This dramatically changes the risk analysis. The killer isn't the distant, scary mob figurehead. It's the guy who asked if you spoke French and wore a sweater vest.
The narrative now splits, forcing Alison to deal with the Miceli family's looming threat at the same time as the immediate danger posed by the serial killer next door. And the climax is just pure cinematic chaos.
Alison was spending the night at Crawford's apartment on West 97th Street, above his Aunt Bee, who was an old-time Catholic. They were finally nearing intimacy, a relationship milestone that had been interrupted countless times by professional duty or marital bureaucracy when a Ray's voicemail clicked on, followed by a frantic scream.
Crawford immediately feared the worst. Peter Miceli, the mob boss, had kidnapped Aunt Bee. He raced off to the junkyard where Peter was headed, leaving Alison alone in the apartment.
But the kidnapping was a brilliant, elaborate ruse. Aunt Bee McDonald showed up unharmed shortly after Crawford left, followed almost immediately by Gianna Miceli wielding a giant gun.
Gianna reveals the truth. She had previously shot Alison under the elevated subway, confirming Alison's previous vague trauma, and had orchestrated the fake kidnapping call specifically to get Crawford out of the apartment. She was there for revenge.
Her motive was highly personalized jealousy and wounded pride. She suspected Alison was romantically interested in her husband, Peter, based on a past slight at Maloney's bar and Peter's apparent fascination with Alison.
And she also confirmed that Ray's vasectomy story was true, dismissing Alison's old theory about Kathy's baby.
And here comes the most significant power inversion of the entire narrative. Gianna confessed that Peter Miceli was a moron, a mere figurehead. She was the one running the organized crime family, ordering the hits.
The actual boss was a grieving, furious suburban mob wife.
As Gianna prepared to shoot Alison and Bee at the Staten Island landfill, the stench providing a grim backdrop, the final stunning intervention occurred. Franco Castellano, the limo driver and goon who had previously been Peter's driver, stepped in.
Franco revealed he was an FBI undercover agent who had been working inside the Miceli family for 20 years. He was monitoring Gianna, who had become a dangerous nuisance, and was disrupting a massive ongoing federal investigation.
He explained she couldn't be killed until the indictment was ready against Peter and his soldiers. And then Franco fatally shot Gianna.
This plot twist just emphasizes the information overload Alison has to process. The mob boss is a figurehead, the real power is the jealous wife, and the seemingly peripheral goon is an FBI agent on a decades-long undercover op. The world is nothing like it seems.
But while the organized crime threat was neutralized by the FBI, the local murder investigation still needed resolution.
Right. The Dobbs Ferry serial murders belonged to Jackson Morrison. Terrace had convinced Jackson to go to their Berkshire summer house to try and rekindle their toxic relationship. But she returned specifically for a necklace Ray had given her. And Jackson just snapped when he found out about the necklace.
And that strange 911 call Alison heard. That was Taria, bleeding to death after Jackson had stabbed her in the house.
Jackson, unstable and murderous, returned to Alison's house, sensing she was close to the truth.
The final confrontation occurred in Alison's backyard. Crawford, racing back after the junkyard ruse fell apart, arrived home just as Jackson confronted Alison with a bloody knife.
And Crawford, shirtless and wearing sweatpants, but pointing his gun steadily, provided the perfect cinematic visual of a detective prioritizing his personal life in a crisis.
Jackson lunged, cutting Alison's hand, a wound that required 10 stitches, later dubbed Q-tip hand because of the voluminous bandages.
And before Crawford could fire, Jackson plunged the knife into his own chest behind the hedgerow, committing suicide as police sirens converged.
The conclusion to the mob subplot provided one more wrinkle of uncertainty. Franco Castellano, the FBI agent, vanished. When Crawford contacted the FBI, they professed never to have heard of him.
Which suggests either extremely deep cover or, as Crawford theorized, that Franco was a member of another family who was hired to take out Gianna, maybe leveraging the FBI connection for cover.
The complete disappearance of the key witness ensures that even the organized crime solution remains cloaked in mystery.
But despite all the chaos and the bloodshed, Section 5 ends on the highest note for Alison: Crawford's personal freedom.
Christine, Crawford's wife, had a complete change of heart. She spoke with Father Kevin and canceled the annulment process entirely, telling Crawford, "Only if you want it. It doesn't matter to me."
She had started dating a stockbroker and was now focusing on her own life.
It's a beautiful piece of dramatic irony. After months of agonizing over bureaucratic religious red tape, Crawford is freed not by the church, but by the sheer, ordinary indifference of his ex-wife finding someone new and moving on. He is finally available without the moral quandary that defined their relationship.
With the threats neutralized, Alison begins the slow process of piecing her life back together, and the aftermath really details her recovery, both physical and psychological.
Her physical injuries were managed. She was on Vicodin, which she used until she had the clarity to flush the rest down the toilet, and she was left with the stitched-up wound on her hand, her Q-tip hand.
But the most unexpected emotional support came from the golden retriever, Trixie, left behind by the Morrisons.
Yeah, Alison notes Trixie remained with her and proved to be very special. The dog also helped Brendan, the neighbor's son, recover from the trauma of finding Terry's body.
Trixie represents this unlooked-for loyalty and a stable, non-human emotional connection in her chaotic life.
Professionally, Alison finally achieved closure on the administrative nightmare that started this whole dive. She received all the required syllabi from the prickly, technophobic nuns.
Sister Callista delivered the final batch, which, Alison notes, was only done because the college was considering controversial courses like gay and lesbian studies.
And Sister Callista included a handwritten note with the syllabi, offering a final, poignant piece of advice. My dear, you should have joined the convent when you had the chance. It's a much safer existence.
It wonderfully summarizes the dichotomy of Alison's life, safety versus excitement.
Alison also tied up the loose ends from Ray's messy personal life. She discreetly mailed Julianne Podolsky, Miss Blurry Tattoo Ass, the blurry sex tape DVD.
She watched the student open the package, noting the deep relief etched on her face. This act gave Alison closure on Ray's infidelity and provided a final, quiet act of redemption for the student.
Now, with Crawford finally free, they begin to settle into romance. They establish a routine, recognizing the constraints of their demanding lives. They schedule Friday nights at her house and Sunday nights at his Manhattan apartment.
This routine is essential for them to maintain the high-wire active life versus the Job, as Crawford describes his demanding work schedule.
His time with his 16-year-old twin daughters, Megan and Erin, takes up his Saturday and Sunday days, requiring a careful balance.
The relationship progresses, culminating in a successful, interruption-free night of intimacy over pizza and cheap red wine, no less after the previous near-miss with Franco's intervention.
Crawford admits he loves her, noting that the word surprised him every time he said it, which indicates a deep, genuine emotional commitment.
And the final piece of the puzzle is the introduction to his children. Crawford promises to introduce Alison to his daughters once Christine's remarriage to the stockbroker is finalized, ensuring the girls have time to adjust to their mother's new relationship first.
It's a measured, responsible approach to building a future together, a far cry from the chaotic, boundaryless relationships that defined Alison's past.
So Alison ends this chapter having survived a full-scale assault from organized crime, the banality of academic bureaucracy, and a serial murderer neighbor. She has a dedicated, available partner and a loyal dog. The complexity remains, but the nature of her relationships has fundamentally shifted towards commitment and structure.
This deep dive into Alison Bergeron's life provides phenomenal insight into identity and risk in the modern chaotic world.
Absolutely. She successfully navigated an incredible amount of information, overload syllabi, mob threats, conflicting suspect profiles, dating rules, bureaucratic paperwork to survive 2 murder investigations.
And the greatest takeaway is the stunning juxtaposition of risk. The sophisticated international conspiracy involving FBI undercover agents and mob wives running the show was ultimately neutralized by government intervention.
Right, but the greatest personal danger was just mundane domestic rage.
We realized the terrifying mob boss, Peter Miceli, was mostly a figurehead, easily avoided once the power dynamics were understood. The ultimate lethal threat was the innocuous suburban guy next door, Jackson Morrison.
The graphic designer who snapped over a necklace and deployed the gruesome mob signature out of, what, pathetic domestic jealousy.
What this reveals is that true risk often lies in seemingly safe, comfortable, and predictable environments. We're trained to look for these large, organized threats, when the immediate personal danger often emanates from unchecked, petty rage simmering just beneath an affable surface.
Alison has survived because of her sharp intellect and her ability to process conflicting information quickly. She's achieved something resembling a happy, committed ending despite the odds. She's free to pursue happiness, but her life remains an absolute magnet for complexity and high-stakes crises.
And the question remains for you, the learner. Alison now has a successful routine with Crawford and a new dog, Trixie. She's learned to avoid the red flags of boundaryless men like Ray. But given her history, how long until her professional dedication or her personal relationships intersect with the next crisis?
Sister Callista suggested the convent life would be safer, but the source material makes one thing clear. Alison Bergeron's life, however dangerous, will never be boring.